Leo believed he had everything under control. He always did. He was the type of man who walked into a room and expected the world to orbit around him. Flashy, confident, and effortlessly charming, at least, that's how he fooled people. To everyone else, he was a devoted husband, a sharp businessman, the kind of man people envied. But I knew better. I had known for months. While Leo was slipping off his wedding ring in dimly lit bars and swiping his platinum card at designer boutiques, I was sitting in my lawyer's office, preparing the paperwork that would cut him off from everything he took for granted. It had started small, an extra work trip here, a late night there. Then it escalated. Mysterious charges on our credit card statements, the scent of unfamiliar perfume clinging to his clothes, a shift in the way he looked at me. Not with guilt, but with arrogance. The kind of arrogance that made him think he would never be caught. The final proof came on a cold Tuesday afternoon in December. I had taken the day off work, feigning a migraine, and decided to follow him. He had told me he was in back-to-back meetings all day. Yet, at noon, he strolled into the Langford Hotel, adjusting his tie and checking his reflection in the glass doors before disappearing inside. I waited. 10 minutes later, she arrived. A brunette, tall and effortlessly put together, the kind of woman who looked like she had never paid for her own drinks in her life. She walked in without hesitation, like she had been there before. Like she belonged there. I didn't cry. Not then. I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white, forcing myself to breathe. That was the moment I decided. Leo thought he was untouchable. That he could lie, cheat, and spend our money on another woman while I sat at home, playing the role of the devoted wife. He had no idea that I was about to rewrite the script. I played my part well. For weeks, I was the perfect wife. I kissed him goodnight, cooked his favorite meals, laughed at his half-hearted jokes. I even pretended to believe him when he said he was working late or grabbing drinks with the guys. But behind the scenes, I was collecting evidence. Phone records, bank statements, *TS of text messages he had carelessly left open on his laptop. I tracked every dinner, every hotel, every lavish purchase. The watches, the jewelry, the reservations under fake names. I hired a private investigator who confirmed what I already knew. She wasn't just a fling. She was an investment. Leo had rented her an apartment under one of his company's shell accounts. He had even set up a fake job for her, paying her a salary for a position that didn't exist. Oh, Leo, you always did love throwing money at your problems. I made sure to document everything. Because when the time came, I wouldn't just leave him. I would take him down. On the day of our anniversary, I watched him from across the room as he adjusted the cuffs of his tailored suit, a smug little smirk playing on his lips. He thought he was the one in control. He had no idea. We had dinner reservations at the Sterling, an exclusive restaurant overlooking the city skyline. The kind of place where the waiting list was 6 months long, but Leo had pulled strings to secure a private table. He wanted the night to be extravagant, like a grand performance, complete with expensive champagne and carefully rehearsed affection. I let him play his part. He ordered a bottle of Krug Claus du Mesnil without even glancing at the menu. $3,000 for a bottle of champagne. I didn't bat an eye. Let him waste his money. As he raised his glass, I got a notification on my phone. Bank alert. $150,000 withdrawal from joint account. The last withdrawal he would ever make. I smiled. He thought he was funding his latest extravagant getaway with her. He had no idea that as he drained the last of our liquid assets, my lawyers were finalizing the documents that would freeze every account, every investment, and every asset he had tied to our marriage. I watched him sip his champagne, utterly oblivious. In less than 72 hours, his entire world would crumble. By Monday morning, he would realize his perfect life was over. And the best part? I would be the one handing him the final blow. Leo considered himself the smartest man in any room. He thought charm was a currency and that his good looks and smooth words could buy him an escape from any situation. But men like Leo always make the same mistake. They underestimate the people closest to them. While he was sending me sweet messages about how much he loved our life together, I was cataloging every one of them, matching his lies to credit card statements and tracking his every move. He thought I was naive. In reality, I had become an expert in his deception. For months, I played the role of the oblivious wife. But behind the scenes, I was 3 steps ahead. Every reservation he made? Documented. Every wire transfer he sent to his mistress? Tracked. Every business meeting that never existed? Logged. I had turned my marriage into an investigation. Leo was a creature of habit. He liked expensive hotels, high-end restaurants, and, most importantly, he loved to feel in control. So when I found out about the offshore accounts, money funneled through his company to fund his double life, I knew exactly how to set the trap. And our anniversary dinner was the perfect setting for his downfall. That Monday morning, while Leo was still asleep in our bed, I slipped out quietly and made my way downtown. I had a meeting scheduled with his company's auditors. You see, Leo wasn't just a cheating husband, he was a fraudulent businessman. He had been shifting company money around, using his position to siphon off funds into personal accounts. His mistress? Officially listed as an employee. Her apartment? Paid for through a corporate expense account. The lavish gifts? Written off as business expenses. And the best part? He had been sloppy. I had everything I needed, records, transactions, even security footage of him personally signing off on fake invoices. By 10 a.m., the company's legal team had copies of everything. By noon, an internal investigation had been launched. By 3 p.m., his accounts were frozen. Leo still had no idea. At 5:30 p.m., he called me, completely unaware that his world was collapsing. "Hey, babe," he said, sounding relaxed. "I'm gonna be home late tonight. Big client meeting. Might run over a bit." I smiled to myself. "No problem, love. Take your time." I had already spoken to the bank earlier that day. By morning, his credit cards would stop working. His name was being removed from every shared account, every investment portfolio, every property. He would wake up to nothing. The walls were closing in, and he didn't even feel it yet. The next morning, I stayed home, pretending to be asleep as Leo got ready for work. He kissed my forehead, such a devoted husband, so sure of himself. He didn't notice I was already awake. I listened as his car pulled out of the driveway. I poured myself a cup of coffee and checked my email. Subject: immediate investigation into financial misconduct, urgent. It had big asterisk N. I allowed myself a small smile as I sipped my coffee, waiting for the storm to hit. By the time Leo stepped into his office, the entire company was buzzing. Executives whispering, financial officers scrambling. His assistant, always so eager to greet him, couldn't even meet his eyes. And then, the moment I had been waiting for. "Leo, can you step into the conference room?" A harmless request. But this was not a normal meeting. Inside, the company's legal team sat waiting, their faces grim. A folder thick with documents lay on the table. Every transaction, every fraudulent payment, every financial lie he had told. "What the hell is this?" Leo scoffed, still believing he could bluff his way out. An internal audit, the head of finance said coolly. "We've uncovered some inconsistencies in your expense reports. Would you care to explain?" Leo still thought he could fix it. "Look, if this is about my spending, I have full authorization." Actually, the lawyer interrupted, flipping to the next document, "You don't. These transactions were processed through unauthorized accounts. This isn't just an HR issue, Leo. This is a legal matter." The color drained from his face. He reached for his phone, maybe to call his mistress, maybe to move whatever money he could. But there was a problem. His bank accounts were frozen. His cards declined. The money was gone. For the first time in his life, Leo was powerless. And I wasn't even finished yet. Back at home, I packed my suitcase. I wasn't going to be there when he returned. I had sent an official notice to our real estate agent that morning our house was being transferred to my name alone. Thanks to our prenup, which Leo had never bothered to read, he had no claim to anything I had brought into the marriage. And thanks to my lawyer? He had no claim to anything I had built during the marriage either. By the time he figured it out, I would be long gone. The only thing left would be the wreckage of his life. Leo had spent months believing he was in control, but I had just taken everything from him. And the best part? He still didn't know who had done it. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in a cheap hotel room, staring at the flickering neon light outside my window, my mind replaying the events of the evening on a constant, merciless loop. The phone call, the woman's voice, the word pregnant. Tom had betrayed me. But as the hours dragged on, my shock transformed into something sharper. I wanted the truth, the full, unfiltered truth. How long had this been going on? Who was she? And just how deep did his lies run? At 3 a.m., I reached for my laptop. Tom had always underestimated me. He thought I wouldn't question his business trips. He thought I wasn't smart enough to notice the inconsistencies in his stories. He thought I would be too broken to fight back. He was wrong. I started with his email. Tom was careful. He always logged out on our shared laptop, but I knew his passwords. They had barely changed since college, just variations of our wedding date and his childhood dog's name. I typed them in. Access denied. I tried another. Wrong password. My pulse quickened. Had he changed them recently? Because of me? I wasn't locked out yet, so I switched tactics. I clicked forgot password and waited for the security question. What is your mother's maiden name? I smirked. Easy. Jensen. The email opened. And just like that, the floodgates burst wide open. Hundreds of emails. Some work-related. Some casual spam. But buried deep within the inbox, under a folder labeled Finances, I found them. Messages from Claire. The first one I opened was from 6 months ago. I miss you. I hate sleeping alone. The next. Are you sure she doesn't suspect anything? I feel like you're pulling away. And then, just 2 weeks ago. I can't keep doing this. You said we'd be together by now. My stomach twisted, but I forced myself to keep reading. There were hundreds of emails, plans for secret weekend trips, gifts he had sent her, long-winded messages about how unhappy he was in our marriage. Lies. All of it lies. And then, at the very bottom of the email chain, I found something that made my blood run cold. An attachment. A sonogram. 7 months along. I felt sick. He had been sleeping with Claire for almost a year. But something still didn't make sense. Claire had only mentioned herself. She never alluded to another woman. So why had Tom's contact in his phone only been labeled as C? Something wasn't adding up. I scrolled further. Searching, clicking through bank statements, work schedules, anything that could give me more answers. And then, tucked between hotel reservations and expensive jewelry receipts, I found another name. Sophie. There wasn't much in his email about her, but there were money transfers. Thousands of dollars wired to a bank account under Sophie Callahan. I copied the account number and opened a private browser tab. When I searched her name, the first result made my vision blur. A wedding registry. Tom and Sophie. Married. Legally married. My lungs seized, and I had to grip the edge of the desk to keep from doubling over. Tom hadn't just cheated. He hadn't just gotten another woman pregnant. He had married her. I sat frozen, my breath coming in shallow gasps as realization slammed into me. Our marriage was never real. I had unknowingly been playing the role of the other woman for years. The vows we exchanged, the life we built together, it had all been a fraud. Legally, I wasn't even his wife. A bitter laugh bubbled up in my throat, though there was nothing funny about it. Tom had played me like a fool. But instead of breaking me, he had given me something dangerous. Freedom. I owed him nothing. No divorce battle, no fighting over assets. There was no legal tie between us, which meant I could destroy him without consequence. I took *TS of everything. Every email. Every transaction. Every secret. Then I picked up my phone. Claire was easy to find. Her Instagram was filled with aesthetic pregnancy updates and blurry *TS of Tom's hands resting on her belly. She had no idea she was just one of his many deceptions. I sent her a message. I think we should talk. About Tom. Sophie took longer. She wasn't active on social media, but I found her name in a local real estate listing. She and Tom owned a house together. The same house where he had taken me for our third anniversary getaway. The rage in my chest burned white hot. I copied Sophie's phone number from one of Tom's old bank statements and sent her a single text. "You don't know me, but I know your husband." By sunrise, both Claire and Sophie had responded. Claire was confused, hesitant. Sophie? Furious. Within an hour, we were on a three-way call. By noon, Claire was sobbing. Sophie was cursing. And by nightfall, the three of us had a plan. We weren't just going to confront Tom. We were going to ruin him. Leo had always walked into his office like he owned the world. Even when he was late, even when a meeting had already started without him, he never rushed. He strolled in, adjusting the cuffs of his tailored suit, flashing that smug little smirk that told everyone he was untouchable. But not today. Today, Leo rushed. His mind was already in a fog from the morning's humiliations. First, his usual driver hadn't shown up. Then, his bank app had locked him out, flashing an error message that made his stomach tighten. His corporate card had been declined at the coffee shop near his office, forcing him to awkwardly pat his pockets for cash while the barista gave him a sympathetic look. When he had tried calling his bank, the representative had politely informed him that, due to an ongoing internal review, all of his accounts were temporarily frozen. And now, as he stepped into the office, he felt something he had never felt before in his career. Unease. The first sign that something was wrong came when his secretary, Ava, wouldn't meet his eyes. Usually, she greeted him with her usual good morning, Mr. Donovan, and a knowing smile. Today, she barely mumbled a greeting. The second sign was the way conversations hushed as he walked past. Employees who normally greeted him with forced enthusiasm suddenly had urgent emails to check, papers to shuffle. And the third sign, the one that truly made his stomach drop, was the email waiting for him when he logged into his computer. Subject: urgent. Mandatory executive meeting. Time: 10:30 a.m. Location: conference room A. He barely had time to process it before Ava's voice came over the intercom. "Mr. Donovan, the board would like you to join them now." Now. Not at 10:30. Not in an hour. Now. Leo grabbed his suit jacket, wiped his sweaty palms on his slacks, and made his way to the conference room. The moment he stepped inside, he knew. This wasn't a meeting. This was an ambush. The entire executive board was seated around the long glass table, their faces unreadable. A team of corporate lawyers sat off to the side, briefcases open, documents spread in front of them. And at the head of the table sat James Calloway, the CEO of the company. Leo had always thought of Calloway as a weak man, a figurehead. He had never taken him seriously. But right now, Calloway looked like a shark who had caught the scent of blood. And Leo was the one bleeding. "Have a seat, Leo," Calloway said, motioning to the empty chair. Leo forced himself to move, his throat dry as he sank into the chair. "Would you like to explain this?" A thick folder slid across the table toward him. He hesitated before opening it. And the moment his eyes scanned the first page, his heart stopped. Every transaction. Every offshore account. Every misallocated fund. The falsified reports. The fake employees. The shell companies funneling money into personal expenses. This was everything. He swallowed hard, his brain working overtime to find a way out. I don't know what this is," he bluffed, forcing out a nervous laugh. "Some kind of mistake?" No one smiled. "Oh, it's no mistake," one of the lawyers said coldly, flipping through the documents. "We have a full forensic report detailing your activities over the last 18 months. We've matched expense reports to fraudulent transactions. We have bank statements, internal emails, and signed authorizations from you." Leo opened his mouth, but Calloway leaned forward, cutting him off. "Do you understand how serious this is?" Leo hesitated for a split second too long. This is absurd." "I've done nothing wrong," he finally blurted. Calloway sighed, as if he had expected that response. He leaned back in his chair and nodded to one of the lawyers. A second folder was passed to Leo. Then perhaps you can explain this, Calloway said. Leo's hands trembled as he opened the second folder. Inside were printed screech asterisk TS. Text messages, emails, reservations at hotels he had booked under fake names. A lease agreement for an apartment, his mistress's apartment, paid for using company funds. Leo felt the blood drain from his face. We have you for financial fraud, misappropriation of company funds, and falsifying reports, one of the lawyers stated, which, if prosecuted, could result in up to 20 years in prison. Leo's vision blurred for a second. Now, Calloway continued, if you cooperate, we may be able to avoid involving federal investigators. But that depends entirely on what you say next. Leo swallowed, his mind spinning. He started, but his voice cracked. He cleared his throat and tried again. I need time to review these accusations. I'll have my lawyer. Oh, your lawyer? Calloway interrupted, shaking his head. Your lawyer isn't going to help you, Leo. Because as of this morning, your lawyer is no longer employed by this firm. Leo's stomach twisted. What? That's right, Calloway said, smirking. And in case you're wondering, your bank accounts are frozen. Your company email has been disabled. Your access to all corporate systems has been revoked. You are, for all intents and purposes, already out of a job. Leo felt the walls closing in. This couldn't be happening. You can't do this, he tried again, desperation creeping into his voice. I've been with this company for 10 years. I've brought in millions. And you stole millions, Calloway cut in. So don't waste my time with loyalty speeches. Leo's hands curled into fists. He needed to find a way out. A way to fix this. Fine, he snapped. What do you want? Calloway smiled. Your resignation. Effective immediately. Leo's jaw tightened. And if I refuse? Then the company files criminal charges and hands everything over to the authorities. And believe me, Leo, once the feds get involved, they will not go easy on you. Silence stretched between them. Leo's mind was racing. If he resigned, he lost everything. But if he refused, he lost even more. He didn't have a choice. With a shaking hand, he picked up the pen Calloway slid toward him and scrawled his name on the resignation letter already prepared for him. The moment he finished, Calloway took the document and nodded to security. Escort Mr. Donovan out. Leo stood, his legs unsteady. Security flanked him, their expressions blank, but their posture firm. As he was led through the office, past the employees who were suddenly no longer afraid to stare, reality crashed down on him. He had lost everything. And worst of all, he still had no idea who had orchestrated his downfall. But he was about to find out. Back at home, I stood at the window, sipping my coffee, watching the driveway. Any minute now. The car pulled up. Leo stepped out, his suit rumpled, his tie loose, his expression a mixture of disbelief and fury. He stormed toward the door, shoving it open so hard it slammed against the wall. Lily, he shouted. We need to talk. I took another sip of my coffee, then slowly turned to face him. Oh, Leo, I said, smiling. I was wondering when you'd get home. Because now? Now it was time for the final blow. Leo stood in the doorway, his breath coming fast, his face red with frustration. He looked completely unraveling, his hair disheveled, his tie loosened, his once pristine suit wrinkled. Lily, what the hell is going on? He demanded. I took another sip of my coffee, savoring the moment. I had waited for this. Oh, Leo, I said, setting my cup down carefully on the marble counter. Rough day? His eyes darkened. He knew. He didn't know how or why, but he knew. I just got forced out of my own company, he snapped, his voice rising. My bank accounts are frozen. My corporate lawyer won't even return my calls. What the F *** is happening? Asterisk. I tilted my head, feigning concern. That does sound stressful. Cut the crap, Lily, he shouted, stepping closer. You know something. You did something. And there it was. The moment he realized that the person he had underestimated the most, his wife, was the one who had orchestrated his downfall. I smiled. You're right, I said, folding my arms across my chest. I did do something. Leo blinked, as if trying to process my words. What? He breathed. I took my time. I wanted him to feel it. You've been lying to me for months, I said. Sneaking around. Spending our money on another woman. Did you really think I wouldn't find out? He stiffened. His face went blank, like a cornered animal deciding whether to fight or flee. Lily, it's not like that. I laughed. Actually laughed. Oh, it's exactly like that, I said, shaking my head. I know everything, Leo. Every dinner, every hotel, every fake business trip. His jaw clenched, but I didn't let him speak. But you know what really pissed me off? I continued. Not just the cheating. No. What really did it was the fact that you stole from me. From our accounts. From the company. You were sloppy, Leo. He paled. You don't know what you're talking about, he said, his voice lower now, desperate. Whatever you think you found. You mean the fake invoices? The offshore accounts? The corporate funds funneled into your mistress's rent? Oh, Leo, I said, shaking my head in mock sympathy. I didn't just find them. I reported them. Silence. A thick, suffocating silence. Leo swallowed, his Adam's apple bobbing. His mind was racing, trying to find a way out. You reported me? He whispered. To the board? Yes. To the bank? Absolutely. To the authorities? Well, let's just say they'll be very interested in your financial history. He took a step back, running a shaking hand through his hair. Lily, you don't understand. This is serious. They'll press charges. I know. He stared at me, disbelief clouding his features. You're my wife, he said, as if that meant anything anymore. I was your wife, I corrected. Now? I'm the woman who just ended your entire life. The aftermath. The next 48 hours were chaos. Leo tried everything. First, he called his mistress. She didn't answer. She had already disappeared, probably realizing that without his money, he was useless to her. Then, he tried his business contacts, but no one wanted to be associated with a man under investigation for corporate fraud. By the time he realized that his assets were frozen and that I had already moved to secure the house, his rage boiled over. You have no right to do this, he screamed at me. I stood in the doorway, watching him pack his things into a duffel bag like a man who had lost everything. Because he had. Actually, I have every right, I said. You signed a prenup, remember? One that states that if you ever committed infidelity, you'd leave with nothing. His hands clenched into fists. You think you've won? He spat. You think you can just get rid of me and move on like nothing happened? I smiled. I know I've won. And with that, I shut the door in his face. Leo wasn't the type of man to accept defeat gracefully. The first night after I threw him out, I expected him to show up at the door, banging, screaming, demanding to be let back in. Instead, there was silence. Which meant he was plotting. I knew him too well. By the second day, he started reaching out. First, it was a long, rambling voicemail. Lily, we need to talk. I don't know what you think you've done, but this isn't right. You don't just destroy someone's life because of a misunderstanding. Call me back. Then, it was texts. You're making a mistake. We can fix this. Let's talk. Lily, I swear to God, if you don't pick up the phone. By the third day, his tone changed. You ungrateful bitch. Do you really think you can do this to me and get away with it? I'll ruin you for this. Watch me. There it was. The real Leo. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Because by then, he was already ruined. The public scandal. Leo had always been obsessed with his reputation. To him, perception was everything. He cultivated an image of success, power, influence, wealth. He took pride in being envied. Which was why I made sure that when he fell, it wasn't just in private. It was everywhere. The story broke 2 days after his resignation. Prominent executive Leo Donovan under investigation for fraud, money laundering. Articles spread like wildfire. Business blogs, financial news sites, even the local paper covered it. People who used to shake his hand now refused to return his calls. His LinkedIn went from being filled with congratulatory messages to radio silence. And the worst part? His own company released a statement. Effective immediately, Leo Donovan is no longer affiliated with our organization. We are conducting a full investigation and are cooperating with authorities to ensure transparency. Translation: we're throwing him to the wolves. Perfect. But I wasn't done. The money. Leo had always assumed our finances were his to control. He had spent our money like it was his personal playground, never thinking for a second that I was paying attention. So when I had my lawyer transfer the house, the cars, and every remaining asset solely into my name, it hit him harder than anything else. He showed up at my doorstep the next morning, looking less like the arrogant man I once married and more like a desperate child. "Lily, please." His voice was hoarse. "Just give me something. I have nothing right now." I took my time looking him over. His expensive suit was gone, replaced by a wrinkled button-down. His hair was messy, his face unshaven. He looked small. "That's not my problem, Leo," I said, leaning against the door frame. His jaw clenched. "You can't just leave me with nothing," he snapped. "We built this life together." I let out a short, humorless laugh. "Oh no. I built this life. You just stole from it." He exhaled sharply, running a hand over his face. "I get it. You're angry," he said, trying to shift tactics. Ed up. "But, Lily, you don't want to do this. You don't want me as an enemy." Asterisk. I smiled. "Leo," I said, lowering my voice, "you're already defeated. You just haven't accepted it yet." His face darkened. "This isn't over," he muttered, turning away. "You'll regret this." I watched as he walked down the driveway, a man who once had everything, now realizing he had nothing. And I felt nothing but satisfaction. 1 month later, I woke up to silence. No angry voicemails. No desperate texts. No more watching my back, waiting for Leo's next pathetic attempt at retaliation. It was over. Leo had disappeared from my life, not by choice, but because he had no fight left in him. The last I heard, he was staying in a rundown extended-stay motel on the outskirts of town, bouncing between cheap rental cars after his BMW was repossessed. He had tried reaching out to his old contacts, hoping for a new job, a loan, anything, but no one wanted to be associated with a man whose name was now synonymous with fraud and scandal. Even his mistress had moved on. She had drained what little cash he had left and left town, blocking his number in the process. Poetic, really. Leo had spent years believing that he was the one in control, that I was just some naive woman who would never see him for what he really was. And now he had nothing. No money. No job. No power. Just the consequences of his own actions. My victory. As for me, I was thriving. The house was officially mine, free of Leo's name. His business ties were cut, his accounts wiped clean. The lawyers had ensured that every single loose end was tied up so tightly that even if Leo tried to crawl back, he'd have nowhere to land. And as for my finances, let's just say I had been careful. While Leo had been recklessly spending, I had been quietly saving, investing, protecting my future. By the time the divorce was finalized, I walked away with everything while he was left with nothing. But the real victory? Freedom. For the first time in years, I felt light. No more checking bank statements for missing money. No more playing detective, wondering where my husband was at night. No more pretending to be the clueless wife while he lied to my face. I had taken back control. And it felt incredible. The final message. One evening, as I was pouring myself a glass of wine, my phone buzzed. A text. From an unknown number. I finally understand what I lost. But it's too late, isn't it? I stared at the message for a long moment, debating whether I should even bother responding. And then I smiled. I blocked the number. Leo didn't deserve closure. I had moved on. And he?